Acura. Everyone knows they're the second division of Honda. But are they the performance division or the luxury division? If you asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have to tell you purely luxury. But with the revival of the Type S, the future of Acura is looking pretty good. But what does that future look like? Today we'll be talking about that and many more things on this episode of Car Talk. Let's get into it. Now, before we start talking about the future of Acura, we have to go over a little bit of brief history of what the company was and always was meant to be. The creation of Acura was really a marketing ploy. And what I mean by that is this. Acura, the company, was made solely for the North American market to sell luxurious Hondas. 90% of these luxurious Hondas had no differences from their Japanese counterparts. And honestly, aside from a couple outliers, all of Acura's lineup has been like that up until about this year. The Integra, the NSX, and the Legend, which were the first Acura cars to be sold in North America, for example, are exactly the same as they are here as they are in Japan. Now, there's nothing wrong with these cars or the fact that they're very similar to their Japanese counterparts. In fact, these three cars that I named are some of the best cars that they produce. But it's just the fact that they are almost exactly the same as they are here in another country. So when you see Acura for what it originally was, it literally was just a marketing ploy to sell more Hondas. Now, who knows how the sales of, let's say, the NSX would have been if it was branded Honda in North America, considering how much hate Honda gets, especially to this day. So maybe making Acura solely just to sell more Hondas was a good idea. So now that we covered the brief history of what Acura was, we can go move on to the modern era, the 2000s. There are two periods within the 20 or so years the 2000s have been active that I like to identify as the last of the glory days and the dry spell. First, we'll talk about those glory days that went on from about 2000 to 2009. Now, during this time, we still had cars like the DC4 Integra Type R being produced, the NSX, the CL Type S, the TL Type S, the RSX Type S. So they were still the luxury division, but they were still releasing these cool, beautiful, light, fun, peppy cars. And if you haven't figured out already by this point, the branding of the Type S is what contributed to all these fun cars. Even the TSX was a fun car, and that didn't even have a Type S version. It literally was just the Americanized version of the CL9 Accordio R for the second generation. The sales are here to back it up. These cars were performing well in terms of sales. So when 2009 ended and 2010 rolled around, why did they get rid of half of these cars? Why did they get rid of Type S? Here we enter the dry spell, when Acura was going through a brand identity crisis. 2002, last year of the Integra, but it was replaced by the Acura RSX. 2006, last year of the Acura RSX. 2005, last year of the NSX. 2008, last year of the TSX. 2009, last year of the TL Type S, effectively killing Type S. What was Acura thinking? Getting rid of Type S, one of their best marketing campaigns, if you want to call it that. They then go on to make loads of mediocre versions of their cars. The TL and the TSX did get revived for another generation, but like I said before, no Type S. The reason I said they started releasing mediocre version of their models is because they started meshing them together with their Honda counterparts that they already sold in the same country. The 2010 TL, literally just a fancy Accord. Same engine, same transmission, just a little bit more horsepower because it's like 500 pounds heavier because of all the luxurious technology inside of there. 2013, the ILX is introduced, and whether you want to believe it or not, and regardless of what Acura says, it's literally an Integra. And the reason I say that is because the Integra was always built off of the Civic platform, and that is exactly what's going on with the ILX. The manual version of the ILX, same platform, same engine, same transmission. It's the same car, but just with an Acura logo. Are you going to be buying the cheaper Honda Civic Si or, the $10,000 upcharged Acura ILX? So essentially during this dry spell period, Acura was making cars, but not really proving to people why they should buy this over their Honda counterparts. Now 2015 rolls around and Acura finally gets a little sip of water. They finally start doing things a little bit different with the introduction of the TLX, which is a combination of the TL and the TSX. This car, although shared slightly similar engines with the Honda Accord, did have an 8-speed dual-clutch transmission standard, which is completely different from what Honda usually does. Now, although this car isn't some light, peppy car like the old days of Acura, This does prove that they're starting to do things a little different. The 8-speed dual clutch also made its way over to the Acura ILX. The V6 TLX also came with a 9-speed automatic as opposed to the Honda Accord V6 coming with a 6-speed automatic. And even though the ZF 9-speed automatic in the TLX was pretty trash before, the mid-cycle refresh, it was still different from what the Honda counterpart was. Between the years of 2015 and 2020, nothing spectacularly game-changing happened for Acura, but they were beginning to differentiate their models from the Honda counterpart. In 2018, the 10th gen Accord came out, so there were no longer any similarities between the current gen Accord and the current gen TLX. 2016, the new Civic gen came out, so that means that the ILX was no longer an Acura Civic. The MDX and RDX were always their own little cars. Obviously, they're most related to like the Pilot, because that's one of Acura's or Honda's SUVs. If anything, those two cars have always kept like the luxury gene of Acura within them over all generations. 2020 rolls around, and despite how terrible of a year that was, the new generation of TLX was announced. With this new generation came the rebirth of Type S. This is when I consider Acura to finally be leaving that terrible dry spell that they were going through. Looking at the TLX Type S and the Accord 2-liter turbo Touring, you can't mesh these cars together. These are two separate entities for once. Acura was finally getting to a point to where you can no longer say that's an Acura Accord. The TLX Type S already is selling pretty well. If you want to find out more about that, click the link up here to my episode 1 of Car Talk. 2020 comes to an end and 2021 finally rolls around, and it's looking pretty good for Acura. 2 more Type S cars have been rumored, and they actually came out to be true. The MDX Type S, which has never been done before, I'm really glad that they're doing that, and the NSX Type S. Now, the MDX Type S is supposed to have the exact same engine as the TLX Type S, which necessarily is not a bad thing, but just the fact that they're even doing an MDX Type S at all is ridiculous. And also, the only reason for the NSX Type S is just because this generation of NSX, the NC1, is on its way out. This is the last production year. But the fact that they're even making an NSX Type S is crazy. The next generation of RDX is rumored to have a Type S version. The new Integra is rumored to have a Type S version. Hopefully that's actually better than this jibber jabber that they released here. If you look at the last decade, Type S was missing from Acura's lineup. They weren't making performance cars anymore. But if you see what I see, if you're looking at the trend, it seems like Acura is finally trying to come back to their roots, making driver's cars for people. Thankfully, it seems that they finally found their place and stopped making Acura clone version of Hondas. Now, regardless of them being part of Honda company, they shouldn't be making exact replicas of Hondas and slapping Acura badge on there. Acura is like a teenager right now, slowly figuring out who they are, what their personality is, what they like, and how they fit into the world. And I'm excited, I'm here for it. I'm ready for the future of Acura. It's looking very good. With all that said, thank you for watching today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time.
Raindrop, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that.